Welcome to Decrypted, the podcast where we analyze the most obscure elements of video game history and culture. I'm your host, Callum Dexter. Technology is a continuously evolving medium. There have been many advancements made in recent history that have allowed for technology to be improved at an incredible pace, from video games to movies to music and beyond. In order to fully appreciate where we are now, though, it's important to understand where we started. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the invention of the world's first minicomputer, the rise of video games, and the impact it made on society today. The year was 1957. Two engineers working for the Michigan Institute of Technology were in the process of founding a company with a vision to build the world's first ever minicomputer. These modules were indeed small compared to other computers at the time, most requiring entire rooms to be stored properly, but by today's standards, I don't think mini quite fits the bill. The idea, though, was that advanced computing could be brought into the workplace and utilized in a business setting. It was the first step towards making technology accessible to the general public, no longer just for use by the world's leading scientists and engineers. The company that would eventually develop and produce the world's first ever minicomputer would be aptly named the Digital Equipment Corporation, or simply just DEC if you like acronyms. The first ever computation device that was released by DEC was named the PDP-1. It had a relatively short production run, with only about 50 units being released from the time of launch in 1959 to the eventual cease of production 10 years later. Despite this, the PDP-1 had long-lasting impacts on the community where it was born and beyond. It had the ability to perform what was, at the time, advanced applications that required graphical processing in real time, which allowed for a level of computing that hadn't been seen on a commercial stage before. Flash forward to 1961. Talk about the fancy new PDP had been making the rounds at MIT. Everyone was scrambling to get their hands on one. Well, everyone who could afford one, at least. The PDP-1 sold for a modest $120,000 USD, which in today's dollars is roughly $1.15 million. Realistically, advanced computing power wasn't in the public's hands just yet, but it was available for big businesses, government agencies, and the ultra-rich. MIT was able to get their hands on one for free as a donation from DEC. It's been widely speculated that the DEC wanted to give back to MIT for its support over the years. More likely, though, it was done so that MIT engineers could reinvent the wheel, so to speak. And reinvent the wheel they did. There was one student at MIT who had particular success with the PDP-1. A man named Steve Russell. Steve, who went by Slug Russell, was a young, up-and-coming MIT student in the early 60s. He had just recently graduated from a well-renowned Ivy League school known as Dartmouth College, located in small-town Hanover, New Hampshire. He studied advanced mathematics there for 4 years, from 1954 to 1958, and soon after decided to pursue his education further at MIT. While in school, he joined the Tech Model Railroad Club, aka the TMRC, as part of his extracurricular interests. The TMRC was formed in 1948 and began to grow ever popular as time passed. It was initially formed for those who loved to tinker, specifically with model trains. The TMRC eventually decided that they wanted to automize the trains fully, a process that had only ever successfully been done by one specific group, the Bell Telephone Company. Finding someone that knew how to operate and build telephone-based relays would be the only challenge, and it was a small one at that. Many members of the TMRC were engineers, mathematicians, and scientists, some with experience in this specific field. On top of all this, the TMRC had connections, particularly to the DEC, developers of the fancy new PDP-1 module. As I mentioned earlier, the DEC ended up donating a PDP-1 to MIT, likely with the hopes that students would experiment and essentially modify the systems to their heart's content. Being a particularly tech-savvy group of individuals with a keen interest in computers, the TMRC, with Slug Russell in their ranks, would be some of the first to set their sights on modifying the PDP-1. And so, the scene was set. One of the most influential companies in computing technology was working with some of the smartest people the USA had to offer. The possibilities were endless. Altered forms of the DEC's PDP-1 module began to spread like wildfire. Modding and/or hacking computers became the new norm, with everyone vying for a chance to experiment with the new tech. Additionally, a massive 9,000 kilobytes of built-in memory allowed for files to be stored on the interface itself, which helped to bring in a new age of programming. Numerous I/O ports with a wide range of compatibility with existing hardware allowed for further modification. MIT was abuzz with technological ingenuity, and the future of advanced computers never looked brighter. So what did Slug end up doing with all this newfound tech at his fingertips? He decided that he would make a video game for him and his friends to goof around with. Largely inspired by the science fiction novels of his youth, Slug would eventually head the development and eventual release of Spacewar in 1962. It was made with love and a fierce desire to fully utilize the ever-present PDP-1's hardware capabilities. Spacewar features 2 spaceships locked in combat in the depths of space, with only one caveat: you weren't the only player. You fought against another person who was able to play with you on the same machine in real time. At first this may seem inconsequential, but keep in mind that this was a whole new territory. Spacewar was the world's first ever player versus player game that was entirely virtual, something thought to be impossible at the time. It utilized the PDP-1's unique time-sharing capabilities, which allowed for multiple processes, in this case players, to be operating at the same time on one console. It was here that the first primitive video game controllers were made too. Russell, with the help of a few dedicated friends and fellow coders, used the PDP-1's many I/O ports to add a feature that enabled the players to use button controllers, and later joysticks, in place of the PDP-1 standard keys. With all these new features being added into the game, and even newer variants of the code being developed, more and more people caught wind of Spacewar at MIT. Everyone wanted to play Slug's game. Eventually, DEC, the developers of the PDP-1, heard about it. They asked if they could borrow the code to the game so they could show off the computing power of the PDP-1 to potential customers. The reason? Spacewar was incredibly advanced under the hood. In order for the game to function as intended, well over 100,000 physics-related calculations needed to be processed by the PDP-1. It also needed to be able to accurately build the constellations around the ships and scale them to size. It was nothing short of a coding wonder on a machine that was at the forefront of innovation during its time. As I previously mentioned, people were desperate to get a copy of Steve Russell's Spacewar. He had no issues giving out the code either. It was available in the public domain on release day and remains so to this day. Just like Slug, many engineers and coding enthusiasts modified his original game, often adding other features and/or improvements to the initial public release of the code. Also, since newer, more accessible versions of the PDP-1, PDP-2, 3, 4, and so on, were becoming more accessible to the public, people modded them as well. It was this level of innovation and the desire to create that allowed for us to get to where we are today. Spacewar was a way to test the latest and greatest technology, with advanced computing and graphical marvels taking center stage, but it was so much more than that. There was, and continues to be, an underlying motif that never gets the spotlight, the whole reason why Spacewar was crafted: passion. Spacewar was a game that came straight from the heart. It was developed for the sole purpose to be enjoyed by all those who got to play it, the very same reason why video games are made today, for fun. And so, without even realizing it, Slug had started a movement. He made the first ever video game on the world's first ever minicomputer, founded the hacking and modding scene with the help of the TMRC, and helped to prove just how powerful technology could be, if we all work together to innovate and put passion into everything that we do. Hey, if you're still here by the end of this podcast, I just wanted to say thank you. This is kind of a new venture for me. I haven't done anything really like this before. I've always kind of had a passion for writing, and I've been watching video essays and documentaries for as long as I can remember. And I'm honestly just playing off of what I know from those, because those have kind of shaped me to be the person that I am today. This is kind of my first foray into some form of journalism, whether that be a physical medium or a video medium. In this case, it's audio. I just put up a YouTube channel literally to upload this, and hopefully it's going to be on Spotify, and keep my fingers crossed, Apple Music as well. But yeah, this would not be possible if I didn't have the support of my family, my friends, people on the website twitter.com. Honestly, it means the world to me that you'd even stop by and check this out. So this is a bit of a shorter episode. Normally I'm aiming to have them at around the 20-minute mark, just because I kind of like that runtime. I feel like it's, it makes a lot of sense for this medium. But this one I just kind of wanted to put my foot in the water, kind of just test things out, see where I'm at, and see if there's kind of an interest for this. If you like this, please feel free to let me know. Any feedback or criticisms would be greatly appreciated, because, like I said, I'm very new to this sort of thing. So I appreciate you, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Peace.